Again, hi, Justin.
Hi, thanks so much. Yeah, I was just saying I'm a Jewish member of the party, and I'm quite frankly appalled by the way in which this issue has been used as a political football. I've been on public record along with hundreds of other Jewish members defending Jeremy's record in dealing with anti-Semitism, and also the success that he's had in actually tackling this issue, particularly since Jenny Formby took over. That was acknowledged in the EHRC report. And I honestly am shocked at the extent of disinformation and misinformation that has been circulating around this issue, particularly the idea that, well, for instance, the idea that the Jewish community speaks with a single voice. There are not only dozens of Jewish organizations, as I said, hundreds of Jewish members, but also leading rabbis from across the liberal to strictly orthodox spectrum that have spoken out in support of Jeremy on this issue. It's simply not the case that a few very dominant voices and groups are the only representative of Jewish opinion on this issue. And the second very important issue, I think, is the fact that the Tory party had candidates, standing candidates in the last election for whom serious allegations of anti-Semitism surfaced. They've done absolutely nothing in response to those allegations. There hasn't been virtually a word about it ever since. That's not an example of how this issue has been belittled and trivialized and weaken the fight against real anti-Semitism, then I'm not sure what is.
You really say that this is a statutory body. It has found the Labour Party guilty of essentially breaking the law. You can't wipe that under the carpet, can you?
Well, this wouldn't be the first time, by the way, that statutory bodies have made mistakes and flaws in investigations and reports. What I do know, unlike you, I haven't read the report in depth, so I'm not able to comment. What I do know is that there is copious evidence of examples in which the leadership office, under huge pressure from groups like the Jewish Labour Movement and other right-wing organisations, pressure to act and deal with complaints that weren't being dealt with, took the absolutely appropriate step of appealing to those senior officials in the party who were in charge of dealing with the personal complaints, asking them to respond to the complaints and to act on them. And those examples are now being called interference that have been discriminated against Jewish people. It's absolutely absurd. It's like trying to square a round hole. There's absolutely no evidence, and indeed I don't believe the EHRC report even suggested it, that any so-called interference by the leader's office was aimed at protecting people who have been subject to allegations of anti-Semitism. Quite the contrary.
What else would their motivation have been?
Quite the contrary. If you look at the evidence of, for example, leaked emails of what that interference consisted in, it was appeals to expedite the complaint investigation process, to escalate sanctions. And this is the evidence, unfortunately, that the EHRC does not appear to have taken into account, which is the evidence that for a long time before Jenny Formby took over the party, it was actually the people responsible for dealing with these investigations were people that were ideologically opposed to Jeremy Corbyn's leadership and were seemingly sitting on complaints and not acting on complaints.
I've got the headline and the strapline here, which goes totally against what you've just said. Exclusive. Yeah. BuzzFeed News has obtained hundreds of internal emails that show the party failed to suspend members despite evidence of racism and took a year to launch a formal investigation into offensive complaints from Ken Livingstone.
Right, which is exactly the problem. But if you actually read the article, and this is the problem with so much of this misinformation, because the framing of the headline is actually bears very little resemblance to what's in the article. If you scroll down and read the article, and particularly look at the examples of the leaked emails, there is, for example, a leaked email from Laura Murray, who was one of Jeremy Corbyn's aides, directly appealing to the very people
Okay.
who
All right.
in
Well,
that program.
I'm going to get I'm going to get my colleague to print that so I can read it during the break. But I mean, obviously, I can't really debate with you on that because I haven't read the whole thing. But I want you to just before I let you go, Justin. I want you to comment on this because the lead investigator at the EHRC briefing this morning, Alistair Henderson, he said that as the leader of the party at the time, and given the extent of the failings and findings of political interference within the leader of the opposition's office, Jeremy Corbyn is ultimately accountable and responsible for what happened at that time. He said, it is hard for us not to conclude that anti-Semitism could have been tackled more effectively if the leadership had decided to. Now, that is fairly damning, isn't it?
Well, I'm not saying it's not damning. There's been plenty of damning judgments that have been made of the leadership, but just because it's damning doesn't mean it's true. And the simple fact is...
are you really accusing the EHRC of not telling the truth, of lying or misinterpreting? Is that really what you're trying to do?
As I say, I haven't read the report in depth, so I'm not commenting directly on the report. But I can absolutely say from the little that I have read and heard about the report is that it clearly does not take account of evidence that is vital and substantial to its terms of reference. Exactly the kind of evidence that's in that BuzzFeed article, exactly the evidence that was in the League Labour report. And that evidence shows overwhelmingly that the leadership was trying for not just months, but a matter of years to get the complaints team to not just to introduce reforms to make it more efficient and more effective, but to get them to act on complaints that we're sitting on. This is the untold story.
You say...
And the simple fact...
So they were trying to interfere with the process on behalf of a Jeremy Corbyn ally, Ken Livingstone, presumably.
On the contrary, they were trying to actually get... Yes, this is the actual untold story. This is the evidence. I appeal to you to read that BuzzFeed. There's a BuzzFeed article in May 2019 which shows very clearly that they were trying to get action on Ken Livingstone in investigations, to get action. They were appealing for action. Now, you can be cynical and say, well, they were just doing that because they were being, they were in the public eye, or they were being urged to by the Jewish labor movement. But I'll put this to you. What else could the leadership have done in a situation where the overwhelming majority of senior officials who were in control of the party machinery were so deeply hostile to that leadership? There is simply nothing else that they could be done.
So they were trying to interfere with the